मेंबर सेक्रेटरी के होने ना होने से उतना फर्क नहीं पड़ता, आप लोगों के होने ना होने से फर्क पड़ता है। वक्ता और श्रोता होना आवश्यक है। मेंबर सेक्रेटरी तो आता जाता रहता है।
हमारा मेंबर सेक्रेटरी प्रोफेसर
तो नहीं होता है।
नहीं, सही है, गरिमा तो बनी रहती है आप सब लोगों के रहने से।
स्कॉलर एंड एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर।
हम सब आपका स्वागत करते हैं भारतीय दार्शनिक अनुसंधान परिषद अकादमिक केंद्र के आज के इस कार्यक्रम में, जिसका कि आयोजन मुख्य रूप से आजादी के अमृत महोत्सव के तत्वावधान के रूप में ही किया जा रहा है। और आज का इस विषय का मुख्य विषय कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ फ्रीडम फिलोसॉफिकल पर्सपेक्टिव्स है, जिस पर कि हमारे साथ इस कार्यक्रम में 3 वक्ता मुख्य वक्ता के रूप में सब उपस्थित हैं। प्रोफेसर सिराजुल इस्लाम सर, डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ फिलोसफी, विश्व भारती वेस्ट बंगाल से है और हमारे भारतीय दार्शनिक अनुसंधान परिषद के सम्मानित सदस्य भी हैं। हम आपका हार्दिक अभिनंदन स्वागत करते हैं। आज के इस कार्यक्रम की अध्यक्षता कर रहे अध्यक्ष भारतीय दार्शनिक अनुसंधान परिषद प्रोफेसर आर.सी. सिन्हा सर कुछ ही समय में हम सब लोगों के साथ उपस्थित होंगे, उनका भी हम अभिनंदन हम नमन करते हैं। प्रोफेसर सच्चिदानंद मिश्र सर, सम्मानित माननीय सदस्य सचिव भारतीय दार्शनिक अनुसंधान परिषद सर, आपका हार्दिक अभिनंदन और स्वागत है इस कार्यक्रम में। हमारे साथ वक्ता के रूप में और 2 मुख्य वक्ता हमारे साथ जुड़े हैं। एक है अगले क्रम में प्रोफेसर गोपाल साहू, आप डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ फिलोसफी इलाहाबाद यूनिवर्सिटी प्रयागराज से हमारे साथ इस कार्यक्रम में कुछ ही समय में उपस्थित होंगे। हम उनका भी अभिनंदन करते हैं। साथ ही साथ हम स्वागत करते हैं डॉक्टर सेबेस्टियन थॉमस वेल्सेरी का। आप सीनियर फेलो ICPR के रूप में अभी कार्यरत हैं। हम आपका भी हार्दिक अभिनंदन स्वागत करते हैं। साथ ही साथ इस आभासीय पटल पर जुड़े हुए प्रोफेसर डॉक्टर कृष्णैया, डॉक्टर लक्ष्मीकांत पाही, ज्योत्सना श्रीवास्तव इलाहाबाद बनारस से और भी बहुत सारे लोग, पूर्ति माहौर और अन्य लोग जो इस कार्यक्रम में हमारे साथ जुड़े हुए हैं, हम सभी का हार्दिक अभिनंदन और स्वागत करते हैं। डॉक्टर जयशंकर सिंह वरिष्ठ सलाहकार और पूरी भारतीय दार्शनिक अनुसंधान अकादमिक परिषद की मेरी पूरी इस कार्यक्रम को हम प्रारंभ करें उससे क्रम में मैं सम्मानित सदस्य सचिव प्रोफेसर सच्चिदानंद मिश्र सर से अनुरोध करूंगी कि वे आज के इस कार्यक्रम में अपना वक्तव्य और अतिथियों का स्वागत करें। आदरणीय प्रोफेसर सच्चिदानंद मिश्र सर।
नमः सभायै। सभा को प्रणाम कर और आज के जो हमारे साथ विशिष्ट वक्ता के रूप में उपस्थित हैं प्रोफेसर सेबेस्टियन जी, प्रोफेसर सिराजुल इस्लाम जी, प्रोफेसर गोपाल साहू जी और विशिष्ट श्रोता के रूप में हमारे साथ उपस्थित प्रोफेसर यम कृष्णैया जी, जो नियमित रूप से हमारे साथ रहते हैं। आपका सहयोग और सानिध्य हमेशा हम लोगों को प्राप्त होता रहता है। प्रोफेसर लक्ष्मी पाढ़ी जी, डॉक्टर शालिग्राम अहिरबार जी और इसी प्रकार से डॉक्टर शशिकला यादव जी और हमारे ICPR से जुड़ी हुई जो लखनऊ के एकेडमिक सेंटर की डायरेक्टर हैं डॉक्टर पूजा व्यास जी, डॉक्टर प्रशांत शुक्ल जी, डॉक्टर पूर्ति माहौर जी और इसी प्रकार से और भी अनेक विद्वज्जन जो देश के अलग अलग कोनों से हमारे साथ जुड़े हुए हैं। मैं क्षमा चाहूंगा कि मैं सभी का नाम नहीं ले रहा हूं। आप सब लोग इस आजादी के अमृत महोत्सव के उपलक्ष्य में आयोजित यह जो आज का कार्यक्रम है उस कार्यक्रम में उपस्थित हैं। आप सभी का स्वागत करते हुए मुझे प्रसन्नता की अनुभूति हो रही है। आज के कार्यक्रम का जो विचारणीय विषय है जिस पर विद्वज्जन आज अपने अभिमत हम सबसे साझा करेंगे वह है कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ फ्रीडम फिलोसॉफिकल पर्सपेक्टिव, स्वतंत्रता की अवधारणा दार्शनिक परिप्रेक्ष्य। सामान्यतया हम या और भी लोग ये सोचते हैं कि देश एक साथ एक खास दिन पर आजाद हो गया। 15 अगस्त 1947 को देश आजाद हो गया। या इसी प्रकार से अन्य भी जो देश हैं, उन देशों के ऊपर भी, जहां पर अमेरिका के ऊपर, या इसी प्रकार से पाकिस्तान के ऊपर, बांग्लादेश के ऊपर, मॉरिशस के ऊपर, अलग अलग देशों के ऊपर जो कॉलोनीज बनाई गई थी, उनके द्वारा उन कॉलोनीज का, उन उपनिवेशों का परित्याग कर देने के बाद वे देश स्वतंत्र हो। परंतु जब हम इस तरह से स्वतंत्रता की बात करते हैं, तो ये एक बड़ी महत्वपूर्ण बात है कि इस पर विचार करना अत्यंत आवश्यक हो जाता है कि ये सचमुच में क्या एक बारगी स्वतंत्रता प्राप्त हो जाती है। दर्शनों में स्वतंत्रता के बारे में बहुत सारी अवधारणाएं आती हैं, बहुत सारे विचार आते हैं। एक बड़ा फेमस स्टेटमेंट है, फ्रीडम इज फ्रीडम फ्रॉम सफरिंग। स्वातंत्र का तात्पर्य दुख से मुक्ति का है। लेकिन मुद्दा यह है, मुश्किल यह है कि इस संसार में हम रहते हुए दुख से पूरा मुक्त नहीं हो पाते, क्योंकि यह संसार जिस पर पश्चिमी विचारधारा में जिसको हम एग्जिस्टेंशियल थिंकिंग कहते हैं, वह एग्जिस्टेंशियल थिंकिंग पूरी की पूरी इसी अवधारणा के परिप्रेक्ष्य में घूमती रहती है, इसी का संदर्भ ग्रहण करते हुए घूमती रहती है कि जो व्यक्ति पैदा हुआ है, स्वतंत्र होते हुए भी उसके साथ बहुत सारी समस्याएं हैं जिनमें वो स्वतंत्र नहीं रह पाता। परिस्थितियों में वो डाल दिया गया है, परिस्थितियों में पड़ा हुआ है, और उन परिस्थितियों के परिप्रेक्ष्य में रहते हुए मनुष्य की यात्रा सचमुच में एक स्वतंत्रता की यात्रा है। और दार्शनिकों ने इस बात को, भारतीय दर्शन के परिप्रेक्ष्य में और अन्य दार्शनिकों ने भी इस बात को बहुत महत्वपूर्ण तरीके से रेखांकित किया है कि दर्शन का उद्देश्य स्वतंत्रता की प्राप्ति के लिए प्रयास करना है। वह स्वतंत्रता किस प्रकार से प्राप्त हो, उसको देखने के लिए परतंत्रताएं किस प्रकार की हो सकती हैं। जैसे कि हमने कहा कि फ्रीडम का तात्पर्य अगर दुख से मुक्ति से है, तो वह दुख किस प्रकार से है, दुख किस कारण से हो रहा है, इसका विचार करना आवश्यक होगा। और वह स्वतंत्रता का एक आयाम होगा। स्वतंत्रता के अनेक आयाम हैं, जिसको हम कह सकते हैं राजनीतिक स्वतंत्रता, आर्थिक स्वतंत्रता, वैचारिक स्वतंत्रता, और ये अलग अलग आयाम हैं जिन आयामों के परिप्रेक्ष्य में रहते हुए हम स्वतंत्रता की बात करते हैं। वो एक जगह पर कहीं कहा गया है कि स्वतंत्रता का तात्पर्य यह है कि हमको सच कहने की आजादी हो। हमको यह स्वतंत्रता हो कि 2 और 2 4 होते हैं। तो अब ये जो आजादी है, यह जो स्वतंत्रता है, वह भी एक वैचारिक स्वतंत्रता, अभिव्यक्ति की स्वतंत्रता के रूप में उसको हम बात करते हैं। और जब कोई दार्शनिक स्वतंत्रता के बारे में विचार करना प्रारंभ करता है, तो उसका दार्शनिकों के साथ एक बात होती है कि उनका परिप्रेक्ष्य, उनका जो फलक होता है, बहुत विस्तृत होता है। और उस विस्तृत फलक को ध्यान में रखते हुए वे स्वतंत्रता की बात करते हैं। तो जब हम आजादी के अमृत महोत्सव के उपलक्ष्य में, आज 75 वर्ष पूरे हो चुके हैं देश को आजाद हुए, माने राजनीतिक स्वतंत्रता प्राप्त हुए देश को 75 वर्ष पूरे हो गए हैं। और जब हम आजादी का अमृत महोत्सव मना रहे हैं, तो हमारे लिए ये विचार करना अति आवश्यक है कि क्या इन 75 वर्षों में हम आर्थिक स्वतंत्रता को प्राप्त कर सके, क्या इन 75 वर्षों में हम वैचारिक स्वतंत्रता को प्राप्त कर सके, या इन 75 वर्षों में हम अभिव्यक्ति की स्वतंत्रता को प्राप्त कर सके, या इन 75 वर्षों में क्या हमने इस प्रकार से हासिल किया है कि जिसमें व्यक्ति की जो स्वतंत्रता है, वह व्यक्ति की स्वतंत्रता समाज के द्वारा बने बनाए ढर्रों के द्वारा बांधी नहीं जाती हो। और यह बहुत मौजू प्रश्न है बहुत महत्वपूर्ण प्रश्न है जिसके बारे में हमको विचार करना चाहिए कि जब हम देखते हैं कि 75 वर्ष पूरे होते समय हम स्वतंत्रता का अमृत महोत्सव मना रहे हैं, तो हमको ये देखना पड़ेगा कि भारत किन परिस्थितियों में किस प्रकार से परतंत्र था, और जब परतंत्र था भी तो क्या उसकी परतंत्रता आज की परतंत्र से खराब थी या बराबर थी? क्योंकि आज भी अनेक प्रकार की परतंत्रताएं हमारे पास हैं। अगर ना होती तो शायद आजादी का अमृत महोत्सव मनाने का अवसर ही नहीं होता, आवश्यकता ही नहीं होती। हमारे देश के प्रधानमंत्री को बार बार आत्मनिर्भर भारत बनाने के लिए कहने की आवश्यकता नहीं होती, क्योंकि आत्मनिर्भर होना भी स्वतंत्रता का एक आयाम है। अगर देश आत्मनिर्भर नहीं है तो वह देश स्वतंत्र नहीं है सचमुच में। और इतना बड़ा देश, इतनी विविधताओं से भरा हुआ देश, जिसमें भौगोलिक विविधताएं भी हैं, धार्मिक विविधताएं भी हैं, वैचारिक विविधताएं भी हैं, और जिसमें मौसम वगैरह को, वातावरण को लेकर के भी विविधताएं हैं, तो ऐसी विविधताओं से भरा हुआ जो देश है, अगर वह आत्मनिर्भर ना हो सके तो उस देश को स्वतंत्र कहना सचमुच में उतना सही नहीं होगा। तो इसलिए वह स्वतंत्रता पूरी तभी हो सकती है जब हमारा देश आत्मनिर्भर बने, वैचारिक रूप से स्वतंत्र बने। हमारे पास अगर हम विचार कर रहे हैं तो उस विचार करने के क्रम में हमारे पास अगर पश्चिमी चश्मे ही उपलब्ध हैं जिनके माध्यम से हम सही और गलत की पहचान करते हैं। हमारा ये कहने का तात्पर्य कतई नहीं है कि हम पश्चिम के द्वारा जो कुछ भी अच्छा प्राप्त किया गया उसको हम छोड़ दें, लेकिन केवल पश्चिम का अंधानुकरण करते हुए, उनके द्वारा जो कुछ बताया गया उसी को स्वीकार करते हुए चलें तो हम स्वतंत्र तो नहीं कहे जा सकेंगे, क्योंकि हम वैचारिक रूप से आज भी उन्हीं के पीछे पीछे चल रहे हैं, उन्हीं की परतंत्रता कर रहे हैं। तो आज 21वीं शताब्दी में राजनैतिक परतंत्रता, आर्थिक परतंत्रता, वैचारिक परतंत्रता, इस प्रकार से परतंत्रताओं के बहुत सारे आयाम हैं। तो अब उन आयामों को दृष्टिगत रखते हुए हमें ये देखना पड़ेगा कि यह जो स्वतंत्रता की अवधारणा है, वह स्वतंत्रता की अवधारणा किस प्रकार से दार्शनिक रूप से, दार्शनिक परिप्रेक्ष्य में किस तरह से आगे बढ़ रही है, या किस तरीके से भारतीय परिप्रेक्ष्य में, भारत के संदर्भ में वह स्वतंत्रता की अवधारणा चरितार्थ हो सकती है। और हमारे साथ अनेक योग्य विद्वान वक्ता उपलब्ध हैं, उपस्थित हैं। आप सबका अभिनंदन करते हुए मैं अपनी वाणी को यहीं विराम देता हूं और यह विषय आपके लिए, विचार के लिए छोड़ता हूं। धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद सर, बहुत बहुत। और सर ने निश्चित ही आज के विषय के बहुत सारे ऐसे आयाम रखे हैं जिन पर कि हम आगामी हमारे जितने भी मुख्य वक्ता जो हैं, आज के विशिष्ट वक्ता, इन विषयों को लेंगे और इन बिंदुओं के माध्यम से हम कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ फ्रीडम के इस केंद्र बिंदु को बहुत सारे अलग अलग आयामों में समझने का प्रयास करेंगे। और निश्चित ही फ्रीडम के सर ने जैसा अभी बताया, बहुत सारे आयाम हैं और अलग अलग तरीके से जब हम लेते हैं, स्पेशली अगर हम पॉलिटिकल फ्रीडम की बात करते हैं तो निश्चित ही पॉलिटिकल फ्रीडम लिबर्टी से कुछ अलग होती है। और जहाँ लिबर्टी एक सब्जेक्टिविटी का काम करती है, फ्रीडम सब्जेक्टिविटी के रूप में नहीं आंकी जा सकती। तो ऐसे बहुत सारे पक्ष को लेकर के हम इस चर्चा को, इस व्याख्यान को आगे प्रारंभ रखते हैं। और अब मैं इनवाइट करती हूँ हमारे फर्स्ट स्पीकर डॉक्टर सेबेस्टियन थॉमस वेल्सरी सर को, जो कि अपना विषय हम सब लोगों के समक्ष रखेंगे। डॉक्टर सेबेस्टियन वेल्सरी।
Thank you, Dr. Vinayji. Respected Professor Sachidananda Mishra, Professor Sirajul Islam, Gopal Sahu, Dr. Gopal Sahu, Dr. Poojaji, my friend Lishmikant Paji, and dear friends. In fact, when I got this invitation yesterday from Dr. Jaisankar Singh, I was a bit terrified because you see, my field is not actually the question of freedom. I mean, rather I have been doing something about Indian philosophy for a longer time, and also Western philosophy, especially phenomenology and existentialism. So then I had a bit of doubt whether what to do, how to accept that. But anyway, well, as it is a question of freedom, I am free to speak something about freedom. So I thought, of course, I should somehow speak something about freedom. Now, with this initial remark, let me start with a view. In the history of Western philosophy, to my understanding, there are two serious philosophers who talked about the concept of being. One is Aristotle, and the other one is Martin Heidegger. As far as Aristotle is concerned, the question is, what is being as being? Whereas Martin Heidegger reformulated this concept, being, and some who talked about what is the meaning of being. Why I talked about these two philosophers? Because you see, we are not concerned about the question of being here. We are concerned about the question of freedom. Now, when we think about freedom, what is freedom as freedom? Just as Professor Chidanand Mishra talked about, we can talk about freedom, political freedom, cultural freedom, social freedom, and there are different levels of freedom. There are different kinds of freedom. But as a student of philosophy, we are concerned about a particular point of view. That is to say, what is the meaning of freedom? How far I am free? In what way can I say that I am a free being? So, when I look at, I mean to say, we cannot have a unified meaning of freedom at all. There are levels of freedom, and there are freedom which are context dependent and also situational also. So, I think when I look at freedom, freedom is said to be the symbol of human values which have important significance for the endurance of every culture and civilization. The concepts such as freedom, liberty, emancipation, and their cognates, have different meanings depending upon the circumstances in which we use these terms. What I'm trying to suggest is that freedom is context construct, both in conceptualization and realization. Following Professor Mishra's point of view, 75 years of glorious existence of freedom we have achieved. Are we free? In what way we are free? Are we free from at least one point of view I would like to ask here? Are we free from looking at the other, maybe in a different glass, different way, different perception? The point is that, we are all suffering from, even after 75 years of glorious existence of freedom of this country, we are suffering from, to my understanding, a self-imposed identity, And once we are able to go away from that, maybe like the Honorable Prime Minister said, we can become, Atmanirbhar, One can become self-reliant only when we give proper accordance to or importance to the so-called self. I mean, without which the self-imposed identities, as long as we are carrying that, we cannot have freedom at all. So what I am trying to imply here is that the idea of freedom and its experience has evolved with the different shades of meaning according to the context and situations. As a matter of fact, I somehow believe that the history of every culture and civilization has been a progressive account to the realization of human freedom. That's why Hegel suggested that the history of the world is nothing more than the progress of the consciousness of freedom. If I am conscious about my freedom, okay, then of course I am on the path of progress. The progression, it comes only when the self is free. If a self which is not free, a self which is, a country which is not able to think for its own sake, a country which is, able to depend upon for anything and everything for others, okay, such a country, they cannot even politically free also. So, my suggestion is that far from being a metaphysical and axiological principle, freedom evolves within a situation in a given society, and it enables human beings to become what they are capable of in their diverse, challenging situations and circumstances. So, my presentation is a humble attempt to explore from a strictly philosophical point of view, not from a very political point of view. Well, one of the outcomes of my approach, I believe, is centered on the language of freedom, which is contextual in character and has manifold bearings upon national and international conflicts to personal relationships. It indicates, again, the very possibility that one cannot talk about freedom without considering its practice point of view. So this is my point of view. That is to say, without the practice point of view, one cannot meaningfully talk about freedom. Well, an initial question that confronts a philosopher, I would like to put it this way. Who is to be regarded as free? Who is a free man, in fact? Are we free at all? If I put it negatively, I would like to argue that the action of a person who is free shall not be dominated by his will, since the will is not an ultimate and isolated entity, but rather determined in its motivations by forces which are beyond his control. To the ancient Greek philosophers, freedom was constitutive of human nature, which is inseparably related to the distinguishing faculty of reason, and therefore they have regarded freedom to be the highest faculty of the human subject. In the sense that, of course, if I am free, it means that, one minute. What happened? There's some connecting problem. Sorry, just a minute. Yes. From this background, when I look at the Greek philosophers, for them, the highest faculty of the human subject is freedom. Only when someone is free to act in a particular way, he or she is able to act in a positive way. That is why maybe the earliest Greek, the religious philosophers, especially in the Christian philosophers, philosophers like Gregory of Nyassa, St. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas, and St. Jerome, they accorded to the idea that perfect freedom lies with the God, and in so far as the human soul is godlike, it partakes of this freedom. Okay, perhaps I think, but I would like to somehow make use of maybe Shankara's point of view also. You see, in the sense that the perfect freedom, if it lies with the God, and if I want to be perfectly free, my soul should be godlike. It means that, perhaps, of course, Shankara talks about the Brahma Sutras, Brahma Sutra Bhashya. He says, as long as the knowledge of the self which is to be sought after has not arisen, so long the self is a knower. But the same knower turns out to be the self, devoid of evil and blemish. It's so beautiful. I always want to say, think about that. As long as the knowledge of the self which is to be sought after has not arisen, so long the self is a knower. And the same knower turns out to be the self, devoid of evil and blemish. It means what? If you want to become perfectly free, if you are searching for such a freedom, that freedom lies where? When I am able to introspect myself, when I am able to appropriate the meaning of myself as myself. If I am not able to appropriate that meaning, understand that meaning, then of course you see, I cannot partake the freedom of God or the freedom with the God. So that's why, the perfect freedom, maybe if I use what to say from the so-called Upanishads, because the Upanishads have been a weakness for me for the last maybe 40 years. Okay. But whether it is Brahadaranya or Chandogya or Isha or Kena or Katha or Taitriya or Aitreya, whatever the Upanishads, we can throw one thing, the Brahman negation. Brahman negation means actually, the Brahman relation is what? It is actually the negation of I consciousness and the object consciousness. If I am able to negate the I consciousness and also the object consciousness, that is a so-called self-realization, the Brahman realization. So to my understanding, I would say Brahma Bhavana to Atma Bhavana, Brahmatma Bhavana, Brahmatma Darshana, Yagatma Darshana. And that is the perfect freedom. And that freedom lies, lies outside the linguistic capabilities rather. To my understanding, it is, of course, we cannot talk about that in a very positivity. Maybe perhaps native style. Not this, we can say. Now, with this background, let me come back to another aspect of freedom. Let me try to search out for some definition of freedom. Okay. Initially, freedom was understood to be a civil status. Later, freedom was understood as a power to form and execute, intentions. Western civilization or Western culture has posited two closely related characteristics to the notion of freedom. One is a private, other one is public. So to say, one is personal and other one is something to be shared. The first, which has political or institutional ramifications, is concerned with the types of action that one takes in a particular situation, which leads to one's realization in one's social life. This narrative of freedom, it concerns the essence of a democratic society, understood not only as a process of choosing or decision making, but as the more general guarantee of the realization of natural human rights. The second definition is said to be rationalistic and individualistic. It focuses on the self-affirmation of the thinking of human being. It affirms the very, very validity of unrestricted yet critical and intellectual research, and it proclaims the significance of truth in human life. Well, the resemblance of between both these definitions are centered on the fact that they are founded in the self as the principle of every intentional state of consciousness in which freedom exists. Such a proposal, it underlines or it undergirds the idea that man is capable of expressing himself, herself in events beyond his being, invoked in the natural process of living. What I'm trying to imply here is that there is a concomitant relation between self and intentional relations, which are the basic foundations of a theory of freedom. Covertly speaking, it also signifies that there is an essential difference that separates these two understandings on freedom, which consists in their mode of representing freedom and its thematic aspects. The thematic aspects are external and social versus internal and individual. With regard to the manners of representation, freedom means a voluntary act which is willfully performed by an individual who lives in a society and who shares his her acts according to the laws of a given society. On the other hand, the ability to free means one is able to live without any kind of limitation, mentally, socially, and existentially. Now the question is that, this is the question which I would like to, I want to posit here. Without any limitation, mentally, socially, and existentially, are we free in this country to live? Or everyone, I'm asking about, not about the people like me, I mean, people who are living in a better society. Once you go to the villages and maybe in the forest, the poor people, are they all free? In the sense that, are they free from their imposed identities? I mean, are we not still, even after 75 years of glorious existence of freedom, I mean, still we are what to say, we are the slaves of caste, ethnicity, religion, class, and of course whatnot. So therefore, maybe it is high time for us to think about this possibility of possibilities. Because after all, philosophy itself is a possibility of possibilities only. So my point is that, if you want to suppose search out for the human emancipation, liberty, or what to say, freedom, I think we should somehow get away from this class consciousness, caste consciousness, ethnicity consciousness, religious consciousness. See, we are still parochial, I should say. So therefore, a person who is so parochial in his mind, in his thoughts, he cannot be free at all. Perhaps, maybe, Advaita has taught us a lot of good things. Rather, I should say, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha. I mean, the one without a second. If I am able to appropriate the actual meaning of Advaita, then of course, there cannot be other with a different caste, with a different religion, different ethnicity, and different class. So my point of view is that, let us try to germinate an awareness in our consciousness, in our what to say, daily life, so that we can think about the very possibility of what to say, vanishing certain kinds of evils which were actually, in our minds. So, well, if I combine to again something about the existential philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Maurice Merleau-Ponty. Of course, I have been teaching phenomenology and existence for almost 35 years. Therefore, especially Indian philosophy, also Indian metaphysics mainly. And Sartre talks about one thing: only my freedom can limit my freedom. In one way, what is it actually? The ontological structure of what to say, certain philosophy is concerned about two things. One is the being in itself, and another one is the being for itself. And being for itself is what? It is nothing but a consciousness. Therefore, the for itself is the foundation of its world for Sartre, and therefore, so chooses its world, its birth, laws of nature, and everything. Therefore, he talks about an absolute kind of freedom. But rather, I don't know, maybe to my understanding, Sartre talks about freedom, maybe in different way also. What freedom is not, okay, not what freedom is, but what freedom is not. Freedom, of course, you see, for Sartre, because I am trying to put Sartre here, maybe to come to my idea of India, maybe like that. Okay, see, freedom is not introspect or discovered empirically, according to him. It is a quality. It is not a quality which is added, or it's not a property of my nature. Rather, freedom is not a power or ability to perform certain actions. It is not a psychological capacity, such as the will. Freedom, according to him, is not a faculty of the human soul to be considered in isolation. it is not a property of any kind, even an essential property. Then what is that? Freedom. I am a free man means what? Freedom is my nature itself is actually, according to him, freedom. Human being means what? Is a free. Free means, free as voluntary consciousness. Now, why I was talking about Sartre, because you see, because Sartre talks about freedom, absolute freedom, okay. Whereas you see, once you come to Merleau-Ponty, he talks about freedom, maybe, it maybe something different way, As far as Merleau-Ponty is concerned, the concept of freedom is the linchpin of a phenomenological description of man in the world. Man's life is not a product of physical or social determinism, but a dialectic, enacted between man and his environment. So therefore, Merleau-Ponty has questioned the concept of freedom as suggested by Sartre, and he says that I can talk about freedom only in a situation, only in a context, because freedom, according to him, is not absolute, but it is embodied. It is incarnated freedom. He talks about incarnated freedom. See, why he talked about this in, see, I got 10 more minutes, sir. Dr. Pooja, how much?
Yes, sir. You have 10 more minutes.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So, why I was talking about this way, about this incarnated freedom, because you see, maybe, the idea of a free India, when I'm concerned about the free India and the traditional culture of this country, India, which is to me, to my understanding, it is the crystallization of material and spiritual wealth created by this nation through its social practice over a long period of time. Can we ever talk about, the idea of India, free India, without sufficiently articulating its philosophy, its worldview, its social values, its religion, its culture, its art, its paintings, and whatnot? So the point is that the predominant point that I want to put forward here is the Indian perception of life. Okay, so to say, the organic view of life. In this view, there are two ways of looking at reality. From the ultimate point of view, wherein differences lose their significance, and from the phenomenal point of view, wherein these differences are to be recognized as to be legitimate. Why I am trying to point out is that, see, if I am able to appropriate this legitimacy, then of course, this country can progress maybe in a better way. I'm sure about it. When again I think about the idea of free India, what comes to my mind is as the first point, is the idea of unity, which this tradition has talked about and practiced for a long time. That is what I wanted to say, is that at the basis of all existence of in the Indian philosophy, or people may say Hindu philosophy, which is a very bad thing anyway, Indian philosophy, there's a complete unity amongst the things. This unity is thought to be unity in diversity. And diversity means the possibility of conflict and contradiction between the various elements that exist together. That's also freedom. Let us not say that, of course, we should not talk about what the so-called sameness. There should be some kind of a conflict. The conflict between contradiction, it can happen between various elements, and then also they exist together. So let us not say that, of course, we are like that. No, it is there. It is the unity of what I say, the uniformity or the sameness. Now that of a logically coherent system where there can be no conflict and contradiction between the elements that go and constitute them. In the Indian tradition, the idea of oneness of reality, oneness of reality has helped to develop characteristic attitudes in the phenomenal sphere also. It has made the Hindu phenomenal ontology, pluralistic in character, and led to the acceptance of a variety of conceptual schemas, phenomenal classification and explanation. Thus, we have a pluralistic methodology, the Naya system that based on perception and inference, which is empirical in character, and we have again Sankhya system, which is what to say, discriminative. Okay, and we have Vedanta, the intuitive. So, see, this was a country which was actually freedom of thought. I mean, once there was a Sankhya, there is a Nyaya, there is, Advaita, Vedanta, like that. So, you have freedom of thought, freedom of what to say, freedom to think in a different way, still exists and beautifully. Okay. So, the idea of such a free India, free thought of India, I call it the idea of an organic worldview. This organic worldview, of course, please do not confuse with organic theory of society. In this worldview, this organic worldview, what prevails is an idea of an eternal cosmic order that pervades all of existence, which is found in the concept of Rudha that occurs in the Vedas. Okay. Maybe to elaborate my point of view, see, I would like to come back to maybe the Purusha Sutta rather, in the Rigveda, I can explain this in terms of an analogy which has been used in the creation hymn of the Rigveda, called the Purusha Sutta, where it is said that the whole of existence, the cosmos, gods, nature, animals, human beings, and their social divisions according to Varna have arisen out of the dismembered limbs of the Purusha, the primeval self, who sacrifices himself, for the purpose of creation. Thus, all things that exist belong to the same body, but as differentiated elements. That is the freedom here, not as sameness. It is an ongoing act through which the universe comes into being, but that's not everything. There is also the process of dying. Sacrifice comprises the dual process of being born and of dying. But such that from death, every time new life emerges. And when this dies, new life emerges, and this process actually has no end at all. It is the experiential openness of the self to the self. What I am trying to point out is that the specific characteristic of the whole process is that all things are interrelated and interdependent in yajna. Speaking in other terms, yajna means a reality where every single thing is interrelated and interdependent. Therefore, it is to be real, and to be real is to be interrelated, and that is freedom. And to be interrelated means interdependent. That's also freedom. And if you try to break away from this interrelationship and interdependence, then we are trying to break it away from reality, and therefore it becomes less real as it were. Therefore, if you want to become more real, that should be interdependency, interrelatedness. Therefore, yajna is really basically a network of real interrelationship. So that's why in the Rigveda it is said that sacrifice is sacrifice to sacrifice. It's beautiful. We are yet to understand the meaning of that. Sacrifice, the subject and object, that's one and the same. This is the a thematic, philosophical, metaphysical understanding of freedom. That is to say that if you see this way, yajna is primarily and not merely an ontological perspective. The ontological perspective is it is intimately connected with and accompanied by a ritual perspective. Therefore, the myth of cosmic Purusha, which talks about maybe the so-called relation, so-called creation him, and the creation, the main thing is that they got freedom and joy there. This is the point. So my perspective, now as we are celebrating the the 75th year of our independence in a way. Now, in a comprehensive way, I would say that if we want to enjoy the freedom of what? Of, appropriating, accepting, understanding the other. That is the highest freedom. And that freedom comes, an expansion of consciousness. It's a kind of, this like, like the Purusha Sukta, dismembering of the Purusha, okay, by which, we can, everything is actually interrelated. So, well, I think I have taken ample time. Let me somehow, conclude my humble talk by reciting a beautiful sloka from Kathopanishad. Om Saha Navavadhu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sakaviryam Karvavahi Tejasi Namaditavastu Ma Vidveshavagi. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Thank you so much, Sebastian, Dr. Sebastian. And as we all know that this title, today's topic, the concept of freedom, has multiple perspectives, and of course, Dr. Sebastian Vaisare has pointed out some of philosophical reflections on it. So thank you very much for your talk. And for the next speaker in our program, I would like to invite Professor Sirajul Islam sir. He is one of the most honorable member of ICPR member, and from West Bengal University, renowned professor of philosophy from Shanti Niketan. We welcome you, sir, in this program. And of course, Professor Sirajul Islam, sir, has so many academic contribution in the so in the field of philosophy also, and in the academic era itself. So many of the things, many committees, members, Professor Sirajul Islam sir, and he has been the administrative experience also from the different committee members and UGC and many other things. And at present, he is a member of ICPR also. So we really feel honored to be invite Professor Sirajul Islam sir for his speech. Honorable Professor Sirajul Islam.
Am I audible, Poojaji?
Yes, sir, of course.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pooja Vyasji, respected Professor Sachinando Misraji, respected our chairman, Professor Sinha, though he is not present here, possibly he is busy for some other activities. Dear Professor Sebastian Thomas Bellasariji, Dr. Gopal Sahu, Dr. Misro, distinguished other people, those who are associated in organizing this program, particularly Dr. Jaishankarji, brothers and sisters. It is indeed a great privilege to join in this auspicious occasion. Nothing is much more better than this academic deliberation and philosophical discussion concerning or observing our 75th Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. It has opened an avenue to all citizens of India to understand their own position. 75 years already, or near, we are going to complete our freedom, or going to celebrate our national freedom. But I am not going to discuss some aspects of sociological, phenomenological or existential aspects. Rather, in doing justice upon the topic, I would like to discuss something concerning the philosophical aspect of freedom. All we know that the term freedom is a very important matter here. The term freedom is derived from German frei, that was particularly utilized. The choice to love or choice to establish friendship. But later on, the concept of freedom is encompassed various aspects. Professor Savistian already stated some angles, even Professor Sachidananda Misroji also given it has political aspect, social aspect, economical aspect, moral aspect, etc. Generally, as a student of philosophy, the term freedom is very important. Now, the dimension has changed. When I was a student in our school, I asked 15th August, in observing Indian freedom, I asked my grandfather, what is freedom? He said sarcastically, freedom is the composition of two words, free plus dom. फ्री से दम ले सकोगे वो फ्रीडम है. Really, we are observing. Today, we are unable to take freedom. Our breathing is also now controlled by the hand of the some people, and due to the natural calamities and pollution which are occurring each and every day, even a baby is unable to take free breathing. But now let's come. Freedom basically, in the eyes of philosopher, it is a concept. Since it is a concept, it is not phenomenal concept. It is a metaphysical concept. And metaphysical concept does not mean supernatural. It is metaphysical in the sense that the things are to be identified in two ways, either in connotative or denotative context. Whenever we are talking about the concept of table or word table, we can ostensibly prove, look here, this is table. we can connote it and denote it both. So it has connotative and denotative aspects both. But whenever we are talking about freedom, there is only connotative aspect and there is no denotative aspect. We cannot say that, look here, this is freedom. So in this aspect, freedom is a term, basically metaphysical concept, and metaphysical concept is idealistic. Whatever we are talking about freedom, in this aspect, since it is a concept, where concept resides? It is in the mind. It is neither in space nor in time, but concept basically in the mind of the observer. In this aspect, it is idealistic. But whenever we are talking about freedom, it presupposes others. If we will not presuppose others, the concept of freedom will be meaningless. It will not be effective. Suppose debt. If there is giver and acceptor, both are there, then it will be effective. So from this idealistic point of view, freedom presupposes other also. Though freedom can be analyzed in diversified forms, however, in moral perspective, freedom can be analyzed, which is much more viable and necessary. In ethics, that the freedom may be classified in two ways. The term free is not same meaning always. Buy one, get one free. There is the notion of free also, term using free. But we are free in our country, or free, I can express freely. The notion of free is something different. Free choice, free will. These are very important. So, philosophically, in order to understand the concept of freedom, the three aspects, philosophical aspects of freedom are much more important here. The notion of, that is the freedom of. Second is freedom from. And third is freedom to be what we want to be. Whenever we are talking about freedom of, then it is particularly related to the individualistic aspect. But sometimes when individual form a group, then it can be understood in the collective ways. When we are applying the notion freedom of, then it's related to freedom of voice, freedom of choice, freedom of will. Whenever we are talking about freedom from, that is freedom from misery, freedom from suffering, freedom from slavery, freedom from bondage. And the third notion or concept, freedom to be. What actually? This is the basic question, the Upanishadic question. From where we arrived, where we will go. Our existence or my existence is permanent, eternal or non-eternal. So we can discuss the concept of freedom. It is from moral perspective, it is the free choice, free will. What does it mean actually? It is the term used, that is desideratum. The term desideratum is, that is, it is needed for us. It is needed for us. And this need is highly important. If I am unable to express my opinion freely, if I am unable to will freely, if I am unable to choose freely, then I never be called that I am a free person. But freedom is very important in human life. But generally there are many misconceptions concerning freedom. Is it bearing any meaning? The freedom means whatever we will think and do without any hindrance. We know there is a poem or article. It is basically one lady was moving in the middle of the road in London city. A policeman asked her, "Madam, why you are moving in the middle of the road?" Lady replied, "You don't know? Today we achieve freedom, so we can move anywhere." Police replied, "Madam, we'll have to follow some rules and regulations. When we are enjoying our freedom abruptly, violently, then we are dictator of our freedom. We are doing dictatorship upon our freedom." In this aspect, the basic question which has also been raised, how far we are free? It is a basic question. But it's also related to another question, who will measure? And in which capacity we can measure? In which instrument we can measure how far we are free? The notion of freedom is different from Western angle and Indian angle. From Indian aspect, before the dawn of civilization of the Western countries, India is much more concerned concerning freedom. Here freedom is much more important in the sense that freedom, Kalidas Bhattacharya says, basically it is the process of transcending someone or transcending individuality. This is the notion of transcendence, through which individuality will back to the origin. By individuality back to the origin, that means it is a spiritual freedom, transcending myself from the nature. This transcendence. So, he analyzed freedom into two ways, positive freedom and negative freedom. Both are very important. Positive freedom means we are withdrawing ourselves from nature. This is purely spiritual aspect, where a person will reunite with the Supreme Consciousness. In transcending natural boundaries and natural miseries. On the other hand, the positive aspect is when a people or a person can enjoy freedom in associating himself or herself with nature, not transcending nature. So two ways of freedom is much more important. So deterministic aspect, freedom and determinism, free will and predestination and free will, both are highly important in moral philosophy. It is a big question. Our all activities are predestined or not? Or we are absolutely free or not? Freedom is the balance. In Indian context, freedom is basically Shadhinata. Shadhinata is the composition of Sha plus Udhinata. That means Sha Udhinata. I will follow the rule of conscience like Kant. But before Kant, it has already been stated by our different scriptures. In the Bhagavad Gita, the notion, a person free from all attachment and aversion and able to control his senses through regulative principles of freedom. That is the free from all bondage and dualities. He will be succeeded. Bhagavad Gita also says, God has granted freedom of choice to men, but it must be exercised in diligent ways. Birth and death, and there is a continuous cycle. So man task is to liberate himself or herself and reunite with the reality. Upanishads also state about the freedom of the soul. Person, in this aspect, person is not body, not the mind, nor ego, but person is deliberately an Atma. An Atma, in this aspect, is spiritual essence, desideratum in all creatures, freedom from re-day, punarmittu, birth and death, transcending liberation or mukti can be achieved. We know the notion of freedom or concept of freedom can be analyzed from individualistic aspect to collective aspect also. In one hand, so how we can make the poise between these two? Individual freedom or collective freedom? Which will get priority? It is the matter of great debate. Whose will get priority? In the biblical outlook or Islamic outlook, God's will is the supreme will. So person's will or individual will has no value. In political freedom, in a political nation, the ruling people wills are much more vital. But as a philosopher, their notion of freedom is different. Here sadhinata, that means abruptly we will not regulate ourselves or channelize ourselves. Rather, rationally, we'll perform our activities as a responsibility. Freedom will not be understood rightly if the notion of responsibility will not be entangled with it. So, whenever we're talking about freedom, at the same time, responsibility will have to remain. Because each and every human being, some sort of responsibilities which are accompanied by moral duties and moral obligations. Freedom does not mean whatever I will like, I will do. Freedom is to regulate our impulses. That means self-rule, rule by conscience. Gandhiji utilized in this sense, he makes the difference between Swarajo and Sadhinata. Swarajo is particularly political, but Sadhinata, that is the freedom where the people can choose, can will, can think, can express without any hindrance. So Swaraj and Sadhinata are different. And from whenever we are talking about Sadhinata and freedom from, that is the freedom from all miseries, all sufferings, all oppression, all subjugation. This notion, whenever we will be able to establish that type of freedom, then the freedom will be actualized. Freedom, Gandhiji said, freedom will not drop from our cloud. Freedom will have to actualize. And each and every people will have to take an oath that I will lead myself or will lead ourselves in the right way, right path. And we will see to perform our duties. Our Indian constitutions, there are various articles. Article 15(2), Article 17, there are human dignity, abolish untouchability, human rights. Article 23-24, which give and guarantee the freedom of religion. And Article 51A entails fundamental duties, at the same time fundamental duties of the people and everybody. The humanistic approach, the spiritual aspect, we know in this time we are observing 75 years of Indian freedom. How many people they have sacrificed? Few names appearing in my mind. They are ladies. They have sacrificed themselves. Sarojini Naidu, Aruna Asaf Ali, Rani Lokhibai, Madam Bhegaji Kema, Usha Mehta, Begum Hazrat Mahal, Kasturba Gandhi, Kamala Nehru, Annie Besant, Vijay Lakshmi Pandit. And we know there are various other male people, those who have sacrificed. But after 75 years, we can criticize, self-criticize. Freedom does not mean only the change of political power. Freedom does not mean only the change of ministry. Freedom does not mean only that observing the particular day. In Gandhian perspective, freedom is Atmanirbharata, self-reliance. In Tagore's outlook, चित्त जेथा भय शून्य उच्च जेथा शीर, ज्ञान जेथा मुक्तो, যেথা গৃহের প্রাচীর আপন প্রাঙ্গণ তলে দিবস সর্বরি বসুধারে রাখে নাই খণ্ড ক্ষুদ্র করি। Freedom from fear, where head is held high. It has a spiritual root, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls. This is the spiritual root, freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, freedom to decry narrow nationalistic boundaries, freedom from all kinds of humiliation, freedom of oppression, freedom from ignorance. And justice will have to establish. How far we have made justice ourselves in 75 years, we'll have to analyze systematically. Freedom does not mean that I have a freedom to steal something. चोरी करने का अधिकार मेरा है, फ्रीडम है. A freedom is not, this is not freedom. So, in this Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, in celebrating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, it is very important what actually we mean of the concept of freedom. आजादी का मतलब है भूखों को खाना, प्यासी को पानी, जिसका कपड़ा नहीं है उसका कपड़ा देना, थके बंद को बिस्तर पहुंचाना. आजादी कवि के लिए शब्द होते हैं, शिकारी के लिए तीर होते हैं, तन्हाई के मारे के लिए महफिल है, डरे हुए के लिए पना, अज्ञानी के लिए ज्ञान, ज्ञानी को लिए कर्म, कर्मठों के लिए बलिदान और बलिदानी के लिए जीवन है. आजादी वो फसल है जिसे बड़े बड़ा ही कट सकता है. रोटी कपड़ा और मकान के साथ साथ अच्छा आदमी बनने का, अच्छा समाज बनने का कोशिश करते हैं. वो रोटी जिस मेहनती ही से खा सकता है, वो कपड़ा जिसे सब में पहन सकता है, वो फ्रीडम वही है जिससे हम सब बंधन से मुक्त हो पाते हैं. ये आत्मबलिदान त्याग के साथ जुड़े है. उपनिषदिक थॉट तेनो तक्कन भुंजिता महाविधा कुश्चितुन्नदा. We'll have to understand and analyze our present situation. The slogan is very important, Bharat Jodo Andolan. It is very important in this context. It is our duty to ensure that the work we do helps the diversity rich Indian get bound closer together. Unity in creativity, self-reliance, and at the same time self-domination and rule by conscience is much more important. इसीलिए आजादी का अमृत महोत्सव ये बहुत महत्वपूर्ण होते हैं. जो क्या भारत का स्वतंत्रता दिवस ऐतिहासिक, क्योंकि राजनीतिक तौर पर आजाद हुए और हमने लोगों के दिल और दिमाग में राष्ट्रीयता का विचार पैदा करना शुरू किया. हम लोग को पूरा गौरव के साथ भारत को जोड़ना होगा. इसके सीमाओं के नहीं बल्कि इसकी संस्कृति, इसके आध्यात्मिक मूल्यों तथा सार्वभौमिकता को जोड़ना होगा. इसमें राष्ट्रीयता के विचार पैदा करना होगा. भारत की पूरी गौरव हम लोग को विचार करना होगा. अच्छा है हम आजाद है, और भी अच्छा होगा यदि हम आजाद रहे. उससे भी अच्छा होगा यदि हम दूसरों को आजाद कर सके. गरीबी, भ्रष्टाचार, अज्ञानता और अंधविश्वास की गुलामी से मुक्त होना चाहिए. इंसान को बंधन से आजाद होना चाहिए. मन को कुसंस्कार के बंधन से आजाद होना चाहिए. पूरा आजादी तब मिलेगा जब हम सब एक साथ मिलके इस आजादी को मना सकते. I am really thankful to the organizers for giving me this privilege to share my views in this auspicious occasion. Thank you very much to all for their patient hearing. Pujaji.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much for elaborating the topic in very serious kind of philosophical notes, particularly with the respects of the concept of freedom. Thank you so much, sir, Professor Sirajul, sir, for your
Thank you.
illuminating speech.
Thank you so much, Pujari.
अब अगले क्रम में मैं प्रोफेसर गोपाल साहू सर जो इलाहाबाद विश्वविद्यालय से हमारे साथ जुड़े हैं उनको आमंत्रित करती हूँ अपने वक्तव्य के लिए। प्रोफेसर गोपाल साहब। जयशंकर जी, हाँ कंफर्म कर लीजिए सर जुड़ पाए हैं अभी तक या नहीं क्या?
उनका मैसेज आया था, शायद वो अपनी बेटी को लेकर कहीं गए। कुछ मैसेज आया
हमारे
था,
साथ
वो
जुड़ पाएंगे या नहीं?
नहीं जुड़ नहीं पाएंगे, ऐसा उनका मैसेज आया था।
एक बार चेयरमैन सर से संपर्क कर लीजिए, अगर उनकी मीटिंग खत्म हो गई हो तो हम सर को।
अच्छा, मैं कर ले रहा हूँ, अभी कर रहा हूँ।
वो आपको मालूम होगा तो और थोड़ा डिस्कस कर लेता।
कुछ यदि प्रश्न हो तो तब तक हम लोग ले सकते हैं।
हाँ,
आप दोनों लोगों के अच्छे वक्तव्य के
कुछ
साथ
डिस्कस कर सकते हैं हम लोग।
जी जी जी। तो हमारे साथ सभी सुधीजन जुड़े हुए हैं। प्रशांत जी भी जुड़े हैं लखनऊ विश्वविद्यालय से, ज्योत्सना श्रीवास्तव भी जुड़ी हैं, पाही जी भी हैं, लक्ष्मीकांत जी। तो कुछ चर्चा यदि हो तो इस पर हम कर सकते हैं। जी लक्ष्मीकांत जी।
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Pooja Vyas, for wonderfully organizing these two spectacular and academically very insightful lectures. First of all, I must give my heartfelt thanks to Professor Sebastian, who has started his lecture from Aristotle to Heidegger, then Aristotle to Sartre, then Heidegger, and he ended with Sahana Bhavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavamahi. And it's beautifully presented, sir. A lot of question may come, but I don't have any question. I have just some silent observations that you presented your deliberation very beautifully. I mean, starting from Greek philosophy to with a conglomeration of Indian culture and civilization. And so far as Professor Sirajul Islam's lecture is concerned, I don't have any question, but I must thankful Sirajulda for beautifully presenting the very core idea of freedom, Swadhinata, Sawadhinata. But one just a clarification from Professor Islam, that whether there is any difference between Swadhinata and Swatantrata, because both the terms are different. And if you go to the textual meaning of the term, I think there is a difference between the two. Otherwise, we should not have been celebrated two words in 2 different days, 15th August and 26th January. Because, and so far as the concept of freedom is concerned, one point which comes to my mind, that जब हम किसी रेस्टोरेंट में जाते हैं तब होटल का जो बॉय आ जाता है, बड़ा मैडम और सर, यूर दिस इज द मेनू टुडे, यू आर फ्री टू चूज। तब हम क्या करते हैं, हम देखते हैं शायद मुझे जॉन्डिस हुआ है कि नहीं, शायद मैं ज़्यादा स्पाइसी फूड लूँगा तो मेरा पेट खराब होगा कि नहीं, फिर मैं अपने वॉलेट की तरफ देखता हूँ, मेरे पास उतना पैसा है कि नहीं, और बहुत सारी कंडीशंस है जो मैं देखता रहता हूँ, और उसके बाद मैं सोचता हूँ ठीक है मुझे ये दे दीजिए, वो दे दीजिए, वो दे दीजिए। So it's very a commonsensical term which is used by, are we free to choose from the menu that the boy served to us? The madam, or sir, you are free to choose. So are we at all free? So I think there is a concept of determinism, there is a concept of autonomy, and there is a concept of free will. I mean, all started from Greek civilization to Indian culture through Kant, through Sartre also. So these are my some observation to Professor Islam or Professor Sebastian. Both can answer. Anyone can answer. Thank you so much for Poojaji for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Lokhi,
Yes, Sirajulda.
for raising some points related to the topic. Really, Shadhinata, there is also Satantrata. Without Satantrata, Sadhinata cannot be emerged. Because in the starting, I have mentioned that Sadhinata or freedom will presupposes other. Without the presupposition of others, that is Satantra. He is Satantra from me. But I am free from his obligation, coercion, force. At the same time, it's my duty to not give any oppression and force to others also. So, they are reciprocally related to each other. Satantrata, so Rabindranath Tagore has given very nice, that human body and human brain, there are millions of cells. One cell is different from another cell, or like Leibniz monad. Innumerable monad, they are Satantra, but there is the harmony, pre-established harmony. That's why there is no window in the monad, so that nobody can influence other. But at the same time, there is the perfect coordination. They can live together, they can move together, they can work together in a harmonious way. Sangachadham, sangbodham, sangvamanang sijanata. This is without difference, how assimilation is possible? Even in the idea of Swaraj in ideas, K.C. Bhattacharya very nicely depicted this idea. There is Swaraj in ideas, there is the differences are needed, but whenever differences integrated and assimilated and work together, that is much more important. One race is different from another race. One people is different from another people. My body is different, organs are different. My hands, legs, heart, kidneys, eyes, nose, all are different. But they have perfect coordination. If nose will say that I will not send any oxygen to lung, then all will die. So each and every body, our relationship, a Persian poet very nicely wrote a poem, the entire globe, all human beings, their relationship are just like the relationship of different flowers of same garland. Bani Adama Azaye Yakdi Garan. Oh, the descendant of Adam, Bani Adama Azaye Yakdi Garan. You are the part of one another. Khebe Afranis Gauharan. Your just relationship, just like the relationship of same garland. A garland can be prepared from different flowers and different colors. But जो आ जाए दर्दावर रोजगार दिगर आजुहाना मंद करार. If the one finger of your hands will be afflicted in daily lives, digar ajuhana manda namande karar, the next finger will also feel the pain. Each and every body, one hand we are different, satantro. On the other hand, we are not satantro. We'll have to remind each and every whether satantro or not. But at the same time, each and every satantro person will have to apprehend their notion of sadhinata. That sadhinata does not mean coercion, force, oppression. Sadhinata ruled by conscience. So, free to choose, there is some sort of determinism also. Absolute freedom is impossible. absolute freedom, only God can be. Those who are believing on theistic outlook, they can say God has supremacy and the absolute freedom. But we have no absolute freedom. We are the tools of the supreme power. Because that is, in this outlook, Brahma Sattam, Jagat Mithya, Jiva Brahma Iva Naparo, that means there is no difference between Jiva and Brahma. But from metaphysical angle and from phenomenal angle, these two angles are different and we will have to analyze. So that means the freedom of choice is also related. Freedom can be fully apprehended through the determinism. Kalidas Bhattacharya also said in his essay. That is, freedom and determinism both are complementary, not contradictory in this sense. Because we are free, but not absolutely free. Because I have some sort of limitations, but we'll have to make the points between these two. But it is not so easy task to give any answer. There is the dichotomy, moral issues are related to it. But as far as possible, whenever we are talking about free to choose and free of choice, we'll have to understand that this freedom, not absolute freedom. Freedom is, that is mitigated freedom. Thank you, Lucky.
Thank you,
Thank you, sir.
Sirajulda.
Any more questions?
प्रशांत, हाँ, आप कुछ पूछना चाहते हैं? नहीं तो हम आगे चलते हैं।
Sir, there is a minor query from my side. You have mentioned about the notion of determinism with reference to freedom. Now, I always get perplexed while talking about a relative freedom. I mean, I have the nature of talking in binaries. So, either there will be determinism or there will be no determinism at all. Because if we take the law of karma as a consequential chain-like sequence, so one kind of freedom will automatically lead, one kind of determinism will automatically lead to other kind of determinism. So this notion of self-determinism or the partial determinism seems a little bit problematic to me. Second point, the kind of explanation you have given seems to me like a very attractive poetic analogy, but the problem with the cells of the body or the fingers of the hand is that they share the same context. But in the human and social society, Plato has already mentioned two crucial terms. The first is memory, and along with memory or remembrance, there will be the context. So don't you think that this analogy is not going to work with reference to the human society per se? Your opinion, sir.
To me?
Sir, what I was asking was that the human society works with memory,
No.
history,
This is to me or Professor Sebastian?
to Sirajul Islam, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Prashanta. Determinism here, there is a dichotomy between predestination and free will, or determinism and free will. But absolute demarcation is not possible. Suppose when already Lokhi raised the questions that when we are going to a restaurant, there are many foods, but all foods are not suitable. But there is also, I can choose according to my choice, food. But sometimes I have some sort of intention that I am interested to take such food, but I have some sort of interest to take sugar in a tea, mixing sugar, but I have high sugar level. Then there is some sort of determinism cannot be analyzed in this sense, but however, our freedom, whenever we are talking about freedom, you are rightly pointed out, it is relative freedom. Or rather, I can term it as contingent freedom. Contingent freedom is different from the notion of necessary freedom. The necessary and sufficient both conditions are very important in philosophy. Whatever is necessary may not be sufficient, but which is sufficient, it can be fulfilled to both criteria, necessary and sufficient both. So symmetrical relation and asymmetrical relation may be analyzed in this context. But determinism here is also determine something, our relativity. That relativity is much more important, that will resist ourselves from, because if we analyze, nobody is free. Even a baby, there are many family, or a boy or girl, those who are living in the family, there are many boundaries. There are many tussles between the father and mother and babies. Also, no, I want to play now. No, you will have to study. But there is a dichotomy. So my freedom is, even each and every creature is conscious for freedom. If you prepare or buy a golden cage and put a bird inside the cage and open the gate, they will fly. Because mukti, liberation, freedom is much more important. They can realize it. When a baby or a student, school children are much more happy when bell is ringing. That's the chutti, chutti, chutti. They will be delighted. Then our soul will be delighted when detached from our mundane or transcending natural circumstances, natural bindings. When it appears, then that soul will be reunited. That's the real freedom. But this phenomenal freedom is related, and it is related to some other boundaries and bindings. That's why absolute freedom is impossible. Freedom means rule by conscience. Sa plus odhinata, rule by conscience, self-rule, self-governing. Gandhiji also stressed upon it. So, thank you very much, Prasanto, for raising this type of question. Very nice deliberation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Pujaji also. Yeah, Pujaji, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, प्रशांत. अब हमारे साथ हमारे माननीय अध्यक्ष भारतीय दार्शनिक अनुसंधान परिषद प्रोफेसर आर सी सिन्हा सर जुड़ चुके हैं. सर, आपको सादर नमन करते हैं, स्वागत भी करते हैं.
वेलकम सर.
जी नमस्ते.
नमस्ते नमस्ते.
सबको नमस्ते.
सौभाग्य है कि आपके साथ साक्षात हुआ ऑनलाइन मोड में भी. फिर जो
दिखाई पड़ रहे हैं
जी
जी,
जो नहीं दिखाई पड़ रहे हैं उनको भी नमस्ते. जो दिखाई पड़ रहे हैं तो करीब नाम तो हम सबका जानते हैं. प्रोफेसर सेबेस्टियन, प्रोफेसर सिराजुल इस्लाम एंड निश्चित ही प्रशांत शुक्ला एंड लक्ष्मीकांत, डॉक्टर लक्ष्मीकांत, ज्योत्सना श्रीवास्तव. तो नाम करीब मेरी आदत है कि मैं कोशिश करता हूँ लोगों को बाय नेम जानने का, और अगर नाम भूल भी जाए तो मैंने आई कैन आइडेंटिफाई seeing each and every one, not only in North India but in South India too. तो वो एक sense of concern, I am concerned. So रेखा पांडे जी और सबको बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. और विशेषकर इस ICPR के academic celebrations, I don't say academic events, I say it is a celebration. And naturally आज़ादी के अमृत महोत्सव के उपलक्ष्य में जो विषय है स्वतंत्रता की अवधारणा दार्शनिक परिप्रेक्ष्य में, तो भारतीय स्वतंत्रता अब यहाँ स्वतंत्रता का, जैसा कि मैंने यह बात सही है कि मैं अपनी सीमाओं को स्वीकार कर लूं। मैंने पूरे उद्बोधन को नहीं मैं सुन पाया, क्योंकि बहुत ही अर्जेंट वर्क के कारण मैं शुरू से नहीं जुड़ पाया, और ये वैसे मेरी आदत रही है जुड़ने की। लेकिन जो सुन पाया, हो सकता है कि हम कुछ बातें मैं अपनी तरफ से इसलिए बोलना चाहता हूं कि सभी सीमाओं के बावजूद अब एक कर्तव्य का निर्वहन, उस हिसाब से चंद बातों को मैं कहना चाहूंगा कि फ्रीडम इज सर्टेनली, ये एब्सोल्यूट फ्रीडम ये एक मिथ है। रिलेटिव फ्रीडम इज रियलिटी। एब्सोल्यूट फ्रीडम की बात लेकिन भारतीय दर्शन में जो डोमिनेंट इंडियन फिलोसफर हैं, शंकराचार्य, तो उनका अब इतना लॉजिकल कंसिस्टेंट, उन्होंने एब्सोल्यूट फ्रीडम की बात की है। और मेरी अपनी आलोचना भी रही है कि एब्सोल्यूट फ्रीडम की बात करने के ये लॉजिकल और कंसिस्टेंट कॉन्सेप्ट बने, इसके लिए शंकराचार्य ने मोस्ट इलॉजिकल concept of the Maya he contrived. The criticism which I had been making since last 2-3 years. लेकिन ये बात तो माननी पड़ेगी कि भारतीय दर्शन को अगर लें तो मोस्ट डोमिनेंट थिंकर इज शंकराचार्य, और उन्होंने एब्सोल्यूट फ्रीडम की बात की है। लेकिन व्यवहारिकता के दृष्टिकोण से केसी भट्टाचार्य ने शंकराचार्य के क्योंकि ये कॉन्सेप्ट दो तरह से हम देख सकते हैं, एक मेटाफिजिकल कॉन्टेक्स्ट में और दूसरा पॉलिटिकल एथिकल, कई कॉन्टेक्स्ट बनते हैं कि इस स्वतंत्रता की अवधारणा को कई तरह से हम देख सकते हैं। तो अभी हम जो बात कर रहे हैं वो मेटाफिजिकल कॉन्सेप्ट, और उसमें केसी भट्टाचार्य ने शंकराचार्य के इस जो फ्रीडम का जो कॉन्सेप्ट है उसको केसी भट्टाचार्य ने कहा कि ये एब्सोल्यूट फ्रीडम नहीं हो पाता है। जब हम तत्वमसी की डॉक्टर सिराजुल इस्लाम का कुछ अभिभाषण हमने सुना, तत्वमसी या अहम ब्रह्मास्मि की जब भी बात करते हैं तो अहम, अब certainly there is a trace of duality. That is the contention of K.C. Bhattacharya stipulated in his very original book, The Subject as Freedom. फिर अगर हम चूंकि बहुत सारी बातें छोड़नी पड़ेगी समय को देखते हुए, यदि हम बात करते हैं केसी भट्टाचार्य का स्वराज इन आइडियाज का बिना मेंशन किए हुए फिलोसॉफिकल किसी भी डेलिब्रेशन में स्वतंत्रता की जब भी बात हम करते हैं तो स्वराज इन आइडियाज, दैट इज ए कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ द पॉलिटिकल फ्रीडम, तो स्वराज इन आइडियाज की बात जरूर करनी पड़ेगी। The most famous article written in 1930 or something near about, published in 1954, it was published in the Philosophical Journal of Shanti Niketan. Swaraj in ideas, that is required to be considered that cultural subjectivism, though we got freedom, और जो एक जब प्रतंत्र थे तो स्वतंत्रता का अर्थ यही था कि हम ब्रिटिशर्स की गुलामी की जंजीर से मुक्त हो जाए. That was the meaning of the freedom during when we were under the rule of British rule. तो वो फ्रीडम, लेकिन हमने 1947 में स्वतंत्रता प्राप्त कर ली. फिर भी हमारी मानसिक दास्ता, subjection, cultural subjection, that cultural subjection और एक सांस्कृतिक पराधीनता हमारी बनी रही. अब इसको माने या न माने, लेकिन बात तो है कि वी आर बीइंग, वो यद्यपि कि मेरी अवधारणा बिल्कुल थोड़ा रेडिकल है, लेकिन ये तो है कि जितने भी बहुत सारे जो वैल्यूज हैं मॉडर्न एज के, वो हम लोगों ने ब्रिटिशर्स से इम्बाइब किया और कहीं ना कहीं अपने जो पुरातन सांस्कृतिक मूल्य हैं उनको कहीं ना कहीं हमने पृष्ठभूमि में डाल दिया. ये जितना भी हम बात कर लें, लेकिन सच्चाई ये रही है. अब हमारे भी अब ये मजबूरी भी है. फॉर इंस्टांस आई कैन से दैट माय ग्रैंडसन, अब उसको भारतीय संस्कृति हम सिखाते हैं, लेकिन जब वो स्कूल में जाता है तो वो स्कूल, चूंकि ऐसी हमारी सीमाएं हैं कि बढ़िया स्कूल में पढ़ने का मतलब है कि कॉन्वेंट स्कूल में. तो बॉम्बे के किसी स्कूल में पढ़ता बच्चा, अब उसको कितनी बार मना करते हैं कि घर में हिंदी बोला करो, लेकिन फिर भी अब उसके भी अपने आर्गुमेंट्स हैं. उसका कहना है कि नाना, मेरी छोटी बच्ची, कि अब हम अंग्रेजी बोलेंगे, अगर घर में अंग्रेजी नहीं बोलेंगे तो स्कूल में भी नहीं बोल पाएंगे, और स्कूल के बच्चे फिर हमको एक गांव देहात का समझने लगते हैं. तो उसके आर्गुमेंट के आगे हमारे आर्गुमेंट्स, फिलोसफिकल आर्गुमेंट्स नहीं चलते. तो ये हमारी भी और ये बात सही है कि कहीं ना कहीं से ब्रिटिश वैल्यूज वो हैंगओवर के तौर पर स्वतंत्रता के बाद भी. तो केशव भट्टाचार्य का स्वराज इन आइडियल इसी बात पर बल देता है कि हमको सांस्कृतिक दास्ता से कैसे मुक्ति मिलेगी. उसको जिन लोगों ने, ज्यादातर लोग फिलॉसफी वाले जानते हैं, पढ़ते हैं, लेकिन जिन्होंने नहीं पढ़ा है या विशेषकर विद्यार्थी, तो उनसे आग्रह है कि दैट इज द मोस्ट ओरिजिनल एंड क्रिएटिव राइटिंग. केशव भट्टाचार्य ने बहुत कुछ नहीं लिखा है, बहुत कम लिखा है, लेकिन कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ फिलॉसफी और स्वराज इन आइडियल, ये दो आर्टिकल हम विद्यार्थियों को हमेशा आग्रह करते हैं कि पढ़ें. तो ये चंद बातें, ऐसे तो बहुत मेरी भी आदत है कि कुछ धीरे धीरे लंबी वार्ता कर सकते हैं, लेकिन समय की सीमा को देखते हुए और ऑर्गेनाइजर के चेहरे को देखते हुए, चेहरे पर कुछ रेखाएं उभरती हैं, तो सीमाएं हमारी, हम समय की सीमा को हम समझ जाते हैं कि भाई अब हमको नहीं ज्यादा बोलना है. तो इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ पुनः जितने भी जिन लोगों ने भागीदारी की, जिन लोगों की जो आए आभासीय पटल पर, उनको मैं बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देना चाहूँगा. और कृष्णैया जी हैं, लेकिन जो वक्ता हैं सिराजुल इस्लाम और सेबेस्टियन, प्रोफेसर सेबेस्टियन, तो उनको मैं बधाई देना चाहूँगा। सुन रहे हैं तो ज़्यादा बधाई है, अगर नहीं सुन रहे हैं तो भी पुरजोर बधाई देना चाहूँगा। इन्हें सब
जी सुन रहे हैं।
हाँ, सिराजुल भाई सुन रहे हैं। तो चलिए, बहुत बहुत बधाई। आप लोगों ने काफी अच्छे, प्रोफेसर सेबेस्टियन का नहीं सुनने का मुझे अफसोस है, लेकिन हमारी सीमा थी, बहुत ही आवश्यक कार्य था। तो मैं इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ मैं आप सबों को नमस्कार करता हूँ। धन्यवाद ऑर्गेनाइजर्स को, बहुत सारे लोगों को धन्यवाद।
सर धन्यवाद सर, और बहुत आपने व्यस्ततम समय से हमको समय भी दिया और एक उद्बोधन के लिए सर आपको आभार। मैं अब ऑफिशियली सभी लोगों को धन्यवाद ज्ञापित करने के लिए डॉक्टर जयशंकर सिंह वरिष्ठ सलाहकार से अनुरोध करती हूँ कि सभी अतिथि जनों को धन्यवाद ज्ञापित करें।
हाँ जी, धन्यवाद मैडम जी। आवाज सुनाई दे रही है मैडम जी?
हाँ जी, बिल्कुल आपकी आवाज में।
जी, आज के हमारे इस कार्यक्रम के इस मुख्य वक्ता जी प्रोफेसर सिराजुल इस्लाम सर को मैं धन्यवाद देता हूँ भारतीय दार्शनिक अनुसंधान परिषद की तरफ से। उन्होंने बहुत अच्छे तरीके से स्वतंत्रता की अवधारणा पर अपने व्याख्यान को दिए, जिससे सभी प्रतिभागी लाभान्वित हुए। मैं धन्यवाद प्रोफेसर सेबेस्टियन थॉमस जी को दे रहा हूँ, जो शॉर्ट नोट में हमारे इस कार्यक्रम में आए और एक अच्छे व्याख्यान का उन्होंने प्रारूप तैयार करके दिया। इसके लिए उन्होंने बहुत धन्यवाद प्रोफेसर गोपाल साहू जी को भी।
प्रोफेसर सेबेस्टियन इज द फेलो, सीनियर फेलो।
अच्छा जी। मैं प्रोफेसर गोपाल साहू जी को भी धन्यवाद दे रहा हूँ, जो इस कार्यक्रम में कुछ तकनीकी कारण नहीं जुड़ पाए। मैं उनको भी धन्यवाद दे रहा हूँ भारतीय दार्शनिक अनुसंधान परिषद। मैं धन्यवाद प्रोफेसर एम.बी. कृष्णैया सर को दे रहा हूँ, जो हमारे कार्यक्रम में लगातार जुड़ते रहे। प्रोफेसर लक्ष्मीकांत पादी जी को धन्यवाद दे रहा हूँ। डॉक्टर प्रशांत शुक्ला लखनऊ से, उनको भी धन्यवाद मैं दे रहा हूँ, जो इस कार्यक्रम में आए और अपने बहुत से अच्छे ऐसे प्रश्नों को भी उन्होंने रखा, जैसे कि लोगों की स्वतंत्रता की अवधारणा का कॉन्सेप्ट क्लियर हुआ। मैं डॉक्टर आलोक टंडन जी को भी धन्यवाद दे रहा हूँ, और इस कार्यक्रम में जुड़े जितने भी प्रतिभागी हैं, प्रताप निर्भय सिंह, डॉक्टर कमलेंद्र कुमार सिंह, डॉक्टर रेखा पांडे जी, जो प्रोफेसर ज्योत्सना श्रीवास्तव जी वाराणसी से, उनको भी मैं धन्यवाद दे रहा हूँ। और इसी तरीके से दिलजीत सिंह जी और ऐसे बहुत से लोगों ने इस कार्यक्रम में ज्वाइन किया। मैं सभी लोगों को
आवाज नहीं आ रही।
इस कार्यक्रम में हमारे जो YouTube चैनल पर भी जो प्रतिभागी सुन रहे थे, उनको भी मैं धन्यवाद दे रहा हूँ। अंत में कार्यक्रम में मैं परिषद के अध्यक्ष प्रोफेसर आर.सी. सिन्हा सर, जिन्होंने व्यस्ततम समय निकाल करके आज इस कार्यक्रम में हमारे हुए, उनके मार्गदर्शन से ये कार्यक्रम हमारा संपूर्ण सफल होता है, उनको मैं धन्यवाद दे रहा हूँ। प्रोफेसर सच्चिदानंद मिश्र, सदर सचिव भारतीय दार्शनिक अनुसंधान परिषद, जिनके निरंतर प्रयास से एकेडमिक कार्यों को गति मिल रही है, उनको भी मैं सर को धन्यवाद दे रहा हूँ। डॉक्टर पूजा व्यास, जो डायरेक्टर निदेशक एकेडमिक सेंटर, उनके हमेशा मार्गदर्शन से और एकेडमिक कार्यों में हमेशा रुचि रखने से और हमेशा कार्यों को एकेडमिक कार्यों को गति बढ़ाने से मैं उनको धन्यवाद दे रहा हूँ। और इस कार्यक्रम के अंत में मैं एक बार आभासी प्रकल्प उपलब्ध सभी प्रतिभागियों को और साथ में हमारे सम्मानीय वक्ता महोदय लोगों को मैं धन्यवाद दे रहा हूँ और नमस्कार कर रहा हूँ।
नमस्कार। थैंक यू सो मच
सर की अनुमति से
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
जी सर, प्रणाम सर,
प्रणाम सादर प्रणाम।
जी सर, प्रणाम।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Sinha ji.
Thank you so much. पूजा जी को, हमारा चेयरमैन सबको
सादर प्रणाम सर,
सादर प्रणाम
सभी को।
सेबास्टियन जी, मेरा नमस्कार टू यू।
धन्यवाद सर।